If you're concerned about student mental health and its impact on re-enrollment, you won't want to miss this episode. Hi, I'm Dr. Cristi Ford, and today I welcome Dr. Amelia Parnell, president of NASPA. We discussed a recent D2L sponsored report highlighting the link between student safety and their likeliness to re-enroll in their institution. Despite the increasing understanding around the importance of mental health, awareness of student support services on campuses still remains low. So join us for this discussion where Dr. Parnell and I share ideas about how to change this.
Welcome to Teach and Learn, a podcast for curious educators brought to you by D2L.
Each week, we'll meet some of the sharpest minds in the K-20 space. Sharpen your pencils, class is about to begin.
Hi, colleagues. Welcome back to Teach and Learn. If you are concerned about student mental health and its impact on re-enrollment, you won't want to miss this episode. I'm Dr. Cristi Ford, and today I'm welcomed by Dr. Amelia Parnell, president of NASPA. I'm so excited to have you joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation to come back and talk with you again.
Absolutely. I have to remember you were one of our first guests in season 1. And so we got such rave reviews around that podcast episode. And with your recent appointment, we just knew we had to have you come back and join us.
Well, it's my pleasure. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems like we always have something to talk about in higher education. So we can do this many times over, and I would enjoy it each time.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. So I want to kick off this episode by referencing a great report by our friends at Tyton Partners called Listening to Learners: How Awareness of Student Services and Safety Relate to Re-enrollment. D2L has had the privilege of sponsoring this research this year, and I've been fascinated about what we're learning from learners that have taken this survey. So for those of you who are listening and don't have context, this report was a survey of over 1,600 students from more than 850 two-year and four-year institutions of higher ed. And of those students who responded, 26% of those students were first-generation students, and almost 20% of the students were also older than 25. And so as I come to this conversation with you today, Amelia, I want to really kind of lead in and talk about some of the initial findings in terms of safety and well-being of students, whether it be in physical or from an emotional standpoint. And what we found from looking at some of the data was there was a strong influence on students' decisions to stay enrolled at the university and college and their feeling of safety. And so some of the nuances that we heard in the report, that we looked at the key statistics, is that students are 4 times more likely to want to discuss campus safety issues with academic advisors. That for physical safety, students who express the highest level of physical safety on campus are 12 times higher, 12 times more likely to stay enrolled than students who express lower levels of safety. And so as we talk about the work that you do at your organization, for colleagues who are listening and don't know as much about NASPA, it is the professional home and association for student affairs administrators in higher ed. And so I'd love to kind of, given that context and primer, really understand, based on your work, what do you think advisors can do to create safe spaces to address some of these issues?
Oh, well, I think we put a lot in the setup there. I want to say, first off, I like any conversation that kind of speculates reasons why students might be doing something or why professionals might be approaching their work in a certain way if it's informed by data. So as soon as you led with the statistics, you had my attention. And I think sometimes there's always this balance of anecdotes, things that you hear kind of in casual conversation versus an actual effort to kind of gather perspectives. Now, anytime I say this, I always say, once you've seen one campus, you've seen one campus. One of my good friends always reminds me that once you've seen one campus budget, you've seen one campus budget. But I think when you start bringing in data, it starts to have a consistent narrative about things. So none of what you shared actually surprised me. And I do have some thoughts. So I think maybe I'll go kind of macro to micro. So if you're thinking like, why would this make a difference now? What is it about advising? I'm going to go out and say that advisors have one of the most critical roles in all of higher education, because at any given time, someone who's trying to navigate a very complex environment like college, they're going to need advice. And literally, if we take the root purpose of advising, it is to provide advice, to provide counsel, some perspective to help individuals make their best decisions. So if I had to think about why it's such a pivotal role in helping students feel a sense of safety, it's because in their middle of their class, we're on a Thursday today, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do with the rest of the day. They have this appointment, then they're going to see Dr. Ford. And they may be coming to see an advisor to ask about some status of a class they're taking or some type of progress toward a credential. But while they're in there, they're also talking about other things. And so I remember I have to fill out the FAFSA, or I have this job interview coming up, or I have to talk with my roommate about this or that. And so advisors are in a role where at any given time, their purpose for being there is to provide a structured set of principled types of advice, but you never know what might come out of the conversation. And if that conversation that weaves in and out of a bunch of different topics makes the student feel like, I can talk to Dr. Ford about this. She understands me. Maybe she didn't answer all my questions, but I feel like I can come to this location, to this person, whether it be virtual or in person, and feel like my questions could get answered. So I think in general, the hard part about that, if you're on the advisor side, is that there's always something to learn. There's always something more to know, issues and things to be current on. But there's also a highly relational aspect of that when students are saying, I actually enjoy going to see my advisor because I feel a better sense of comfort and belonging. There's a lot that's wrapped up in that. To the stat about students who feel more safe staying on campus, I think that's probably consistent with what any of us would experience in everyday life. I don't want to go to a restaurant if I don't feel like it's secure, that someone at any given time could make me feel unsafe. I don't want to spend my time or my money or my talent and contribute to any space that I feel like I'm not safe in. So I didn't realize the stats were as obvious as that, but I think it'd be hard to debate that. So I would also say trying to maintain all of that, trying to figure out for each individual student what's going to be the right combination of number of sessions with an advisor or number of factors to make them feel safe. I want to give some space for campus leaders to say, Amelia, we're working on it. You know what I mean? When you talk to these students, it's hard to find the right prescription for every single student at all times without exception. But I can say more often than not, our data are consistent that the role of advisors is incredibly important, and that the issue of health, safety, and well-being is at the top. So quick sidebar and shameless plug. Speaking of data, NASPA did a survey of senior leaders to ask about the top issues in student affairs, and numbers 1 through 5 all relate to health, safety, and well-being. So that's I'll see your Tyton report and raise you some additional NASPA data.
Talk about triangulation in its finest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate your focus and comments around once you've seen one campus, you've seen one campus, right? So thinking about institutions of higher ed are not a monolith, right? That there are lots of complexities in terms of how students come to campuses, what they need. I guess I'm, thinking about this data and thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and understanding the importance of safety and psychological and physical safety being just one of those pieces that are absolutely critical. But also thinking about the role of the advisor, from connecting with students around upcoming semester, making sure that academically they're moving along and they, have the right supports. I guess I'm just wondering, in this day and age, if there is this new nuance here around safety and re-enrollment that is emerging at this time, or what are you seeing based on what you talked about in terms of the trends that NASPA has done in terms of those five areas?
Yeah. So I don't think it's new. I just think that we're at a place where we can't avoid talking about it. I think in the days of old, we've always known that a campus has to be safe, literally physically safe for individuals. And I'd say from an emotional standpoint, we've had ample research to suggest that students' sense of belonging, comfort, and that their identities would be affirmed has a really big impact on their decisions to stay. But sometimes the headlines, they shift every few years. And so if we're looking at reasons why students don't complete college, oftentimes the headline is monetary. So it's not to say that hidden in plain sight, we didn't have these discussions of safety, but oftentimes it takes up a lot of space to be talking about the cost of college. And once you get past that, then it's their academic preparation. And after that, it's their literal capacity to be preparing for a career. And so somewhere in that gumbo of reasons why students would choose to stay or not, health, safety, and well-being was always there. But I think at some point, when we start to see different shifts in the industry, shifts in world events, that bumping up to the top happened gradually, and it's been there the whole time. So in terms of what I see in terms of campuses trying to address it, within that top 5, it's not like we're saying number 1, mental health, number 2, mental health, number 3, mental health. There's a little bit of nuance. So some campuses wrestle with the strain of keeping capacity of counselors. So knowing that there's a lot more interest in I'd say demand for services, some campuses struggle with having enough capacity, literally counselors available to have repetitive or frequent meetings with students if they need to. And it doesn't always mean a student in crisis, like a 24-hour emergency. It literally might be, I'd like to speak to somebody. I'm having a period of stress, maybe around a particular event. There's also the ongoing training needs that those individuals have. I mean, the issues continue to emerge. And so you want to be able to actually sustain that type of enterprise. And then lastly, that training kind of spills beyond just those trained counselors, but others on the campus. So when we talk about advising, we oftentimes talk about the need for it to be holistic. And so it's not to say that everybody now needs to take on the responsibility of counseling and looking out for health, safety, and well-being issues. But again, to that same example, if I went to meet with Dr. Ford, and in my conversation with you, I kind of disclosed that there are some other things I'm dealing with. How much should our advisors feel like they have enough capacity to listen out for certain things and then know how to properly refer that individual to someone else? So yeah, I think the short answer is it was always there. I just think that maybe the conversation space for it wasn't always at the headline level, but it is right now. I think most times when I talk to vice presidents of student affairs or even presidents, many of them, if I ask them, what do you think are the top 5 issues on your campus? Somewhere in there will be health, safety, or well-being, or all 3.
You paint a really good picture in terms of the need for advisors to have the opportunity around upskilling, the challenge of the ongoing complexity of demands of the student experience on campuses today. I mean, when we look at some of this research, we heard from the Tyton Partners report that students really wanted to be able to talk to academic advisors around some of these topics. But as the response from advisors was, we really have these other areas that we need to address in terms of scheduling and re-enrollment and some of the pieces that go along with that. I guess I wonder if some of this, as you look at innovation and technology, do you think this could partially be solved by the use of chatbots or texting services where students can maybe have an opportunity to share what's on their mind at 3:00 in the morning and the next curated so then advisors can reach out and have more information? Or maybe is that not even scalable? I don't know. What are you hearing and what are you thinking about in terms of what advisors should be doing and utilizing technology to enable and empower some of these things?
Oh, absolutely. You answered the question already for me. That was a softball question. I don't mind you giving it to me. I really want to set the backdrop with some assumptions and understanding that certain conditions, if they're in place, then absolutely, that is the ideal scenario, I think, where I guess some would refer to the interactivity mix of technology versus human interaction. But understanding that if there's a campus that has capacity to invest in technology, whether that be artificial intelligence or some other platform of a different type, also the capacity for individual advisors to actually learn how to use it effectively. So I also want to just say, anytime we have a technology conversation, at least with my colleagues, it's not going to be long before someone says, with what money, Amelia? How much is this going to cost us? We don't have unlimited budget. And if that's not enough, they've invested it. With what time do I have time to reconstruct my whole operations? So I want to say, understanding that it's not a plug and play solution, but for campuses that have the capacity, either personnel, time, money, things like that, to actually do this, I can see a scenario in which the student has the actual opportunity to sit down and talk with their advisor about the 2.0, 3.0 level questions, not what classes should I be taking. I mean, degree mapping has been going on for quite a while. I could totally see some pre-work being done that the student would enter in some information. The advisor might do the same, and that this technology platform might actually take care of a lot of that administrative piece of the advising session. So if I only had 30 minutes with my advisor, 15 minutes of what would have probably been very, very tactical stuff gets done in advance. And that leaves more room for me to tell you why I want to be an architect or why I want to major in business and that type of thing. So I hope that the leveraging of technology happens at a pace where it doesn't feel like it's a kind of flip the switch type thing. And some who may not be used to having that level of involvement with the chatbot feel like they're a little bit behind. But I think it's going to be the space for the future. Now, I'll also admit that I'm definitely that person. I made this joke on a panel one time, but I think people can relate to it. Even for as much as I just gave you that answer, I kind of sold the idea that the future will involve us leveraging technology. If I need to change my flight plans and I have to call the airline and it says, I am Aaron, I can understand full sentences, how can I help you today? I'm going to say, representative, just because I want to talk to somebody. And I know for a fact, if I just put in that chat, all I want to do is change my city to a different city or change my time or change my seat. It's not that I don't trust that the chat bot or that the virtual assistant can do it, but I just need to talk to Cristi. I need to tell you exactly why I want that window seat. And I want to tell you why I want that window seat to be closer to the front, the type of thing. And so I realize there's a certain amount of individual work we'll have to do to get ourselves ready to leverage technology. And that's not about training. That's not about money. That literally is about disposition and an appetite to move into a different space. So I too have work to do. I hope you all, the listeners, won't judge me for that, but that's what I think.
And I appreciate you saying that, because really it's a paradigm shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, I mean, I do the same thing. I'm pushing 000 representative,
Exactly.
right? Because you learn all the tricks over
Mhm.
the years, but at the same time thinking about the caseloads of advisors and the
Absolutely.
complexities of issues that advisors are dealing with. There has to be an opportunity to
Mhm.
compromise. And I appreciate how you said the pre-work. Like
Yes.
there is always for us at D2L an emphasis and focus in AI or
Mhm.
any kind of technological enhancement, keeping the educator, keeping the human in the loop of things. And so making sure that there is that human intervention, that human touch, but it needs to be high impact. And so I appreciate your thoughts around the administrative pieces, because advisors typically get in the business of being advisors because they want to be able to connect and engage and enhance lives of students. And so if we can use technology to help them do that better, then that, that's just penultimate in terms of this work.
Absolutely.
So I want to move on a little bit and pull out another point around student support and awareness from this Tyton report. There was one piece that was listed there around awareness of support. So we talked earlier about the connections to safety and physical safety and the things that students need. But we then started to see in the report a big disconnect between institutions and students when it came to support services. And so the report really talked about institutions and the amount of money. You talked earlier about budget, the amount of money the institutions invest in student support services, with the understanding and assumption that students are going to use them. Yet the report showed that only 50% of the students that were surveyed were actually aware of key services like academic and career advising, financial aid, even mental health counseling. And so I guess I'd love to understand, as we talk about the importance of awareness and communication, what are you hearing from student affairs professionals around this phenomena? And are there opportunities that we need to be able to align differently to be able to close this chasm between awareness and get students the support that they actually need on campus?
Mm-hmm. And I would say there's a continuum going on here. If we frame the question one way, it looks like students are not reading their email, which is the very, very quick response that most professionals say. Well, we all know students don't read their email. And oftentimes when I hear that, I would say, I think they actually do read their email, but because they get so many different types of messages, ones that might just be a reminder, hey, don't forget to do this thing. Others that might be take action. You have to do this thing by this particular date. Others that might be, I want to meet with you. Can you meet with me tomorrow at this particular time? And so if it comes to be that students get this many messages at a time when they're walking across campus, or they might be in class, or they might be going to some other higher priority thing, by the time they get back to their inbox, there are 15 messages, all requiring different levels of attention. And at that particular time, they're like, I'm just not going to respond to any of these. I've got to figure out what my next thing is going to be. So I want to just acknowledge that sometimes it's literally about the volume. And I oftentimes tell friends I deal with the same thing in my personal Gmail account. And so sometimes I'll just scan it and just see what needs my immediate attention. And if I don't respond to every one of the other ones, they could easily think, well, Amelia never reads her emails. No, I read them. I just haven't taken the action that I need to. But I think in the bigger scheme of things, to get students to take action, the kinds of actions that we want to prescribe for them to take for their success, I've oftentimes heard that it takes several iterations of trying to deliver the same message. And so I want to acknowledge that it's not just a challenge for the students, it's a challenge for administrators and faculty and staff as well to figure out some level of coordination. So I don't want to frame it as though there's some type of misstep that's been happening, but there's a whole lot we have to do to make any organization work, whether that be a campus or D2L or NASPA. And so one day, faculty are prioritizing messages that they want to go to the students at the same time that the registrar is prioritizing messages that they want to go to students, as well as financial aid, as well as student affairs. And so my biggest suggestion would be to take a fresh look at how we can coordinate those messages. Now, I realize that type of coordination means, really, are you saying we now have to have a weekly group meeting for all the entities that want to email students? No, I'm not saying that. But to some degree, if we were to do a little bit of a communications audit across the board, on average, how many messages hit A. Parnell at Big State University, .edu? It might be a little surprising. And to some degree, maybe we can figure out a different way of sequencing these messages there. So I'd say the first suggestion would be some level of just truly like an audit of communication. at NASPA, I went with that hunch, that idea that students don't read their email. And we did a little bit of a smaller project to try to really figure out to what extent within student affairs, this communications piece was actually kind of, moving in the right direction. And what we found was that there were a number of campuses who said, I actually wish we had somebody, like somebody who was our communications person within student affairs. And so I don't know if that's a new role that's going to emerge per se, but many of them said that they're at a minimum, they're doing the thing that most organizations do, which is that we have a communications calendar. On Mondays, we always write them about this. On Tuesdays, we write about that. And we have somebody who's managing the calendar and the sending of the messages. But that's a little bit different than the strategy. You say across all these messages, are there places where certain messages can be combined or certain places where a different level of priority? So you asked what NASPA is doing. I'm still having the conversation about, do students read their email? That small study, I think it unearthed a few things. It left us with more questions than answers, which a good research study should probably do. But the short answer to a very simple question was, I think we should probably take a fresh look at the number of messages. That would be a really good place to start. And then to see across all those messages, is there a way to create some efficiency? Because on the other end is an individual student who's looking at this long list of things in their inbox, like, okay, I'll get to all this later. And so I want to shift that narrative a little bit, but I absolutely do agree that communication is probably the key piece to getting students from just hearing about something they should do to actually taking the action. So if you find somebody who's doing exceptional work, send them to me. I would love to learn more.
I think that you're onto something in terms of that importance around coordination and collaboration. And so, it's more than just keeping the trains running, more than getting, information across the multiple channels. But to your point, being able to, in the tech world, we talk about UX and we talk about the student journey, and being able to, kind of to chronicle that student journey, to understand, maybe it's week 3, maybe it's week 5, like what is the journey of a student throughout the semester, and how can you create strategies that will then inform the opportunities to be able to action some of this work. And so as I'm listening to you, I can just literally see this diagram that really, leans into the strategy around that, and then is informed by the research and what we know about students and their well-being. You've piqued my interest a little bit, though, so I'm going to kind of come off script a little bit and ask you a little bit more about your work around NASPA and the research you've done. And you talk about the top 5 in wellness and safety and well-being. Can you talk with the listeners a little bit more about what you found in that research survey?
Which one? About the top 5 issues?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So shameless plug, you can go to Google and put in NASPA 2024 top 5 issues. And it was really just the effort that I wanted to do to kind of get into the mix of using research to actually answer these questions like, well, what are the big issues? If you had talked to me a year or two ago, I probably would have said, I'm not quite sure about the top 10, but I think somewhere at the top will probably be mental health and probably the cost of college, things like that. But I got tired of doing it anecdotally. I got tired of doing it just as a one-person perspective. So I decided to ask my colleagues to work with me and launch the inaugural annual survey of top issues in student affairs. Now, I'm not thinking that every year the top 10 is going to be completely different, but the idea is that we'll see types of movement. So your question earlier, you're like, hey, what's about this emergence of conversation around health, safety, and wellness? I was like, well, actually, I think it's been there the whole time. I would know that if I say, hey, this year's top 5 are these, next year's top 5, something else moved up from the top 10, number 6 position, number 5. So that's me being a little bit nerdy, but my goal for the survey really is to give this idea that every year VPs of student affairs, or even those just getting into the field, or those who are looking to work with a student affairs division to help them address their needs, third-party partnerships, things like that, they would be able to point to some trend data around what the top issues are. And so again, the nuance within that health, safety, and wellness piece is it really revolves around capacity challenges. So literally having enough people to fill these roles. Some of them are sustained once you get them there. I mean, it's high demand. So imagine if a lot of campuses really need counselors. It's a very competitive space. And if you can really sustain your workforce, it's a huge thing. And then training is in there too. The issues continue to evolve, and you want to make sure that your approach is aligned with what these students really need us to be able to provide to them. So if anybody's curious, I guess what didn't make the top 10, there's a whole webpage for it. You can find it on the NASPA website. It's free and available.
Of course,
so check it out. Yeah. There's a whole lot more to it. So yeah, that was the dream I had, that I wanted to be in the mix of using data to actually speak to these top issues.
And I love that you're going to take a longitudinal approach to this, and so that you can really be able to chronicle over the years what student affairs professionals are seeing, how these trends are shifting. And I can just literally almost feel like I see a leaderboard, right? Yeah. Like something may be in spot 1 this year, next year it moves to spot 3, and then really be able to to look at that journey. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
It's also a little bit of a way to prepare for what's coming. The idea
That's
that
right.
maybe something is new to the top 10, like, well, let's keep an eye on this. Maybe 3 or 4 years later, it'll be in the top 5.
As I'm listening to you and talking to you, I'm thinking about listeners who may be feeling like, well, I'm a faculty member, or I'm in charge of online at my institution. I think we know collectively students are all our responsibility, and we all have a call to action. But as you think about your work you're doing at NASPA, for those who are listening to this podcast episode, if you were to have a call to action around, mental health and wellness, around physical safety, around this conversation we've had around advisement, what might that be, and how might you call them to action in terms of what they can be doing for students on our campuses, either physically or virtually?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the right thing to do to be on one person's podcast and then mention another person's podcast, but I feel like I should do it. There's the Ed Up Provost podcast. I don't know if people have heard of it. I was on that podcast. The episode just launched, I guess maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. But the question was, let's talk about the relationship between student affairs and academic affairs. So when you mentioned that, I was like, okay, this shameless plug. Listen to this podcast first, and if you have time, listen to the other podcast. But in that conversation, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity to talk about a relationship that continues to evolve in people's discussions. And depending on who you're talking to, they almost make this depiction that student affairs and academic affairs are either in competition or conflict with each other, when honestly, I think a lot more collaboration happens than most people would probably give credit for. If they're looking for that drama, that I just don't think it has to be there like that. Because to your point, we're at a place now where students are moving about all of our functional units, departments, and divisions. Gone are the days of like, this is my responsibility and this is yours. I think we're in a place now where it's a much more even set of conversations. So I offer that just as a setup to this. So I think if it's a faculty member or someone working in instructional design or online education, and the call to action from the president of NASPA, who represents this 14,000 member association, what I would probably say is 2 things. If we're not careful, we could limit student affairs to a narrative of only crisis management. So if anything happens that's unfortunate in nature, emergency, oh, I'm so glad we got student affairs because they stepped in crisis. And I think it's good to have that association with professionals who can step in a time of need. If that's not the first narrative, the other narrative is like, I'm so glad we got orientation and clubs and activities and all of this fun and engaging things that student affairs does. And they can almost paint this picture that all we do is provide engagement opportunities. And we do some of that, but we also do crisis management. The third piece is where the call to action is, which is student success. And in many cases, students are learning things in student affairs divisions and departments, service learning, cultural competence, problem solving, all these places where students are picking up skills and abilities and the capacity to show and demonstrate what they know and can do. Student affairs educators, that's the phrase that people oftentimes don't lead with the way that I hope that they would. So the first call to action is, if you have time, give a kind word or a note to your resident student affairs professionals, because there are many hats that they wear. And in some cases, they are crisis managers. In some cases, they are engagement specialists. And in some cases, they are student success specialists. And so that doesn't mean that academic affairs doesn't do that. It doesn't mean that our IT professionals don't either. But I would say in this particular climate of the whole continuum of things that professionals are doing, student affairs professionals, they do a lot. So you probably knew that was coming. I can't be leading NASPA and not say, give some kudos to your colleagues. The second thing I would say is a continuous of what we already do. So back to that same first point about the Ed Up Provost podcast. I probably didn't have to say the name again. Now I'm doing a commercial for them. But the second point is what's already been happening. There's already a lot of collaboration. So I would say, if anything, talk about it more. If you have a chance to be at a conference or a webinar for faculty, invite your student affairs colleagues to come with you. If you're in IT or you're in business and finance and you have a topic, like maybe it's addressing students' basic needs, and you as a VP of finance have been investing in that, invite your colleagues from student affairs to co-present with you or co-write with you. I think the more we can create the narrative to show people where this partnership is happening, it helps to dispel these myths that keep this level of drama going, but I hope to at some point, wash away a little bit. So yeah, first call to action, give a little extra love to your student affairs colleagues. The second, invite us to be a part of your conversations outside of student affairs so we can end up promoting more of this collaboration.
Fantastic. The first time I had you on this podcast, it was to promote a fantastic book that you wrote around data. And now you're back and you are the president of NASPA. So every time I talk to you, there's something new that you were championing and you're doing. And so I guess I'd love to kind of end this episode with understanding what's next for you, what's next for your presidency, or anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today.
Honestly, I want to share gratitude. I'm about 6 months into the presidency, and it's been wonderful. It really has been wonderful. So my priority probably for the next year or so is to continue to get more immersed in the student affairs community at the campus level, and of course within the membership. So in my previous role as VP of Research and Policy, I got to take a very broad look at national issues in higher education. And I'll continue to do that. But as a president, you start to want to know the more intricate details of the business. And so I want members who join NASPA to know that I am looking at all kinds of data about their experiences with NASPA. Not in a creepy way, but what used to be my focus on students' outcomes and writing about how campuses can use data, I'm looking at business intelligence now. So I want to know if, Cristi, if you came to our annual conference and you also signed up for a webinar and you also bought one of our books, I want to know where your interests are. I want to know, did you open those emails that I sent you? Back to those same types of data that you would ask if you were leading a campus. So first priority is to just get even more under the hood of NASPA operations. Not to be micromanaging or anything like that, but I want to make sure when I'm on stages and talking about the benefits of NASPA that I understand what our members really need and want from us. The second is I'm still going to be nerdy. I'm still reading things. So if you want to know what's on my short list, AI, of course, you probably knew that was coming. I want to know how AI not only can be leveraged to help students on campuses, I want to know what nonprofits are doing with AI. I want to know what D2L is doing, what's NASPA doing, what are associations doing to leverage AI? Because to some extent, what happens in industries like healthcare and manufacturing is going to happen in higher ed, and what happens in the nonprofit space in those industries happens in the nonprofit space in education. So beyond that, also just having time to have podcast conversations with my friends. In many ways, I get to be a champion for this very valuable and vibrant and versatile, how about that for alliteration, organization. So when I get invitations like this, I just enjoy it. So I don't know what the next solo independent and adventure might be for me, if a book or something like that, but I'll know when it happens. So that I'm gonna be talking to the people within NASPA and within student affairs. I'm gonna be on podcasts and things like that, and also just learning more about the true business intelligence of the association. So that's where I'm at for now.
Today,
that might change at some point.
Really, really fantastic. I adore you, the work that you do. I respect so much where you are taking the field. I am so honored to know you and really excited about your presidency. It sounds like we have another conversation to have around AI and nonprofits and student affairs. So we will book that at another time. But I really want to thank you for coming on and being a guest here with me today.
My pleasure. I'm happy to come anytime. I know we have no shortage of things to talk about. And I know you could invite anybody to be on the show. So thank you for not only inviting me the first time, but having me back again. So I hope your listeners enjoy the conversation. If something else comes up you want to talk about, you know how to find me.
So thank you to our dedicated listeners and curious educators everywhere. Remember to follow us on social media. You can find us on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at D2L. And subscribe to the D2L YouTube channel. You'll also be able to sign up for the Teaching and Learning Studio email list for the latest updates on new episodes, articles, and masterclasses. And if you like what you've heard today, remember to rate us, give us some feedback, share this episode with a colleague or two, and remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Bye for now, and thanks for the time.
You've been listening to Teach and Learn, a podcast for curious educators brought to you by D2L.
To learn more about our K-12 and corporate solutions, visit D2L.com. Visit the Teaching and Learning Studio for more material for educators by educators, including masterclasses, articles, and interviews.
And remember to hit that subscribe button. And please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, school's out.